Let me start with what may be the most controversial House of the Dragon spoiler we have seen so far. According to a leak that has been making the rounds online, Season 3 of House of the Dragon will open with a scene that takes Aemond Targaryen and his mother, Alicent, in a direction nobody saw coming. The setup is this. Alicent begs her son to leave King's Landing because Rhaenyra is closing in. Aemond agrees, reluctantly. And as they embrace in what is supposed to be a final goodbye between mother and son, Aemond leans in and kisses her on the mouth. Alicent, according to the leak, reacts with shock. Her eyes fill with terror. The scene ends there. Now, before anyone panics, this leak is not confirmed. HBO has not verified it. The source is a fan account, so take it with a grain of salt. But here is the part that makes this rumor much harder to dismiss than your average internet whisper. Just hours before this leak surfaced, the actor who plays Aemond, Ewan Mitchell, gave an interview with ID magazine. And in that interview, he said two things that should make every House of the Dragon fan stop scrolling. He said Aemond has, quote, a drop of an Oedipus complex. And he said Aemond has, quote, a very skewered idea of what affection is. That is the actor of the character, telling us, in his own words, what direction this character is going. So today we are going to talk about why this rumored scene exists, why it makes sense within the world of House of the Dragon, why it might be the most important character moment of Aemond's entire arc, and what it would mean for the way we understand him going forward. Because whether or not the kiss actually happens on screen, the dynamic that would cause it has been building from the very first season. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's get into it. Let's start by being clear about what we actually know versus what we are speculating about. Because this is important. I am not here to confirm a leak. I am here to analyze a possibility. What we know for certain is that Ewan Mitchell, in a real published interview, described his character as having an Oedipus complex and a warped understanding of affection. Those are the actor's actual words. He chose them carefully. Actors do not usually casually drop Oedipus complex into magazine interviews unless they want you to think about it. What we have heard rumored is that this Oedipus complex will manifest in a specific scene in the Season 3 premiere where Aemond kisses Alicent on the mouth during what is supposed to be a goodbye. What we can analyze, regardless of whether that scene airs exactly as described, is whether this kind of moment makes sense for Aemond as a character. Whether the show has been building towards something like this. Whether the dynamic between Aemond and Alicent has been telling us all along that something deeply wrong was developing under the surface. And honestly, once you go back through the first two seasons with this lens, the answer is uncomfortable. Because the signs have been there the whole time. We were just not looking for them. Let's start with Aemond as a child, because to understand the man, you have to understand the boy. Young Aemond was the forgotten child. Aegon was the firstborn, spoiled one, the one Alicent had to constantly clean up after. Helena was strange and inward, but had her own quiet protections. Daeron, the youngest, was sent away to Old Town. Aemond was the middle child with the worst possible fate. He was old enough to be ignored, but young enough to be powerless. And what does Aemond do in this environment? He attaches to the one person who gives him any kind of consistent attention, his mother. But here is the thing. Alicent does not actually give him much. She is too busy, she is too stressed, she is constantly managing her father, her husband, her oldest son, the politics of court. Aemond does not get warmth from her, he gets duty, he gets occasional approval. He gets the leftovers of her emotional energy. So Aemond grows up starving, not for food, for affection, for approval, for the kind of love every child is supposed to get from their parents, but he never quite did. And the only source he has for any of it is his mother. So she becomes everything to him. She becomes the only person who matters, the only person whose opinion he wants, the only person whose presence calms him. That kind of attachment, when it does not get fed properly, gets distorted over time. A child who only ever gets crumbs from one person eventually starts to obsess over that person. The love does not stay child-shaped, it mutates. It becomes something more intense, more possessive, more confused. By the time Aemond is an adult, he has had years to build this internal cathedral around his mother. She is not just his mother to him, she is his only point of safety, his only emotional anchor, the only person in the world he believes truly understands him. And that is exactly the kind of foundation that, if you push hard enough, becomes something the rest of us would call disturbing. Now let's talk about what happens to Aemond after he loses his eye. This is the moment that supercharges everything. He is humiliated, he is wounded. His brothers and cousins gang up on him, and it is his mother who reacts the strongest. Alicent draws a blade on a child to defend Aemond. She loses control of herself in front of the entire family. She becomes, in that moment, the only person on his side, and Aemond never forgets that. From that night forward, his bond with Alicent is the defining relationship of his life. Not his bond with Aegon, they barely tolerate each other. Not his bond with Helaena, she is too detached from reality to engage with him. Not his bond with his father, Viserys is dying and was never close to him anyway. His bond with Alicent is the only intimate relationship Aemond has. And we see how he treats it. He listens to her when he listens to no one. He defers to her judgment when he would never defer to anyone else's. He looks at her with a softness he never shows another person. He even, at one point, holds her hand and presses his forehead against hers in a way that, if you remove the family relationship, would read as romantic. Now combine that intensity with what Ewan Mitchell said, a character with a skewered idea of affection. A character who never learned what a normal mother-son bond is supposed to look like because nothing in his upbringing was normal. A character whose only experience of being loved came from one woman, and who has spent his entire emotional life orbiting her. For someone like that, the line between mother love and other kinds of love does not exist the way it does for the rest of us. He never had a healthy template. He never learned where the boundary is supposed to be. So when his emotional intensity around Alicent reaches a breaking point, it does not know what shape to take. It just comes out wrong, confused, devastating. That is what an Oedipus complex actually is in a clinical sense. It is not literally wanting to marry your mother. It is having unresolved emotional attachment to a parent that distorts your ability to form normal connections. And in extreme cases, those attachments can become physical in ways that horrify both parties. If the leak is true, that is exactly what we are seeing, not desire. Confusion. Aemond reaching for the only person who ever loved him and not knowing how to express it like a normal son would. Now let's talk about Alicent's side of this, because the leak specifically describes her reaction. She is shocked. Her eyes fill with terror. That detail matters. Because if the scene was just disturbing for shock value, the show could have written her any number of ways. She could have slapped him, she could have screamed, she could have pushed him away in disgust. Instead, the choice is terror. Why terror? Because terror is the reaction of someone who suddenly realizes they have lost control of a situation they thought they understood. Terror is what happens when the picture in your head of who someone is gets violently replaced by who they actually are. Alicent has spent Aemond's entire life believing she was raising a son. The kiss tells her, in 1 second, that she actually raised something else. Something she does not recognize. Something she helped create without ever meaning to. This is the horror of the moment. It is not the kiss itself. It is what the kiss reveals about everything that came before it. Every quiet conversation, every protective gesture, every moment Aemond looked at her with that intensity she always told herself was just love. None of it was what she thought it was. He was building something in his head, and she was the unwitting subject of it. That is a parental nightmare, and it is also a very House of the Dragon kind of tragedy. Because this entire show is about people slowly realizing that the family they thought they had is not the family they actually have. Alicent realizing what Aemond has become is just the most intimate, most personal version of that theme. It is also worth pointing out that this would not be a one-time thing in Alicent's life. She has been blindsided by men her entire story. Her father groomed her into a political tool. Her husband used her as a young replacement for a wife he was still mourning. Criston Cole pulled her into something messy and codependent. And now her own son, the one relationship she thought was clean, the one bond she thought was uncomplicated, turns out to be the most warped of all. The terror in her eyes is not just about that single moment. It is about every moment that led to it, and the realization that she missed it. All of it. So let's pull back. Why would the show actually do this? Some viewers are going to hate this scene if it airs, some are going to call it gratuitous, some are going to call it a step too far. But there is a real storytelling reason why this moment, if it exists, belongs in the show. The Dance of Dragons in the books is a story about family destroying itself. It is about people who share blood turning on each other in ways that are unforgivable. The show has been trying to find ways to make that horror feel personal to a modern audience. We are not as shocked by brother fighting brother for a throne as people in Westeros would be. We are not as horrified by political marriages or arranged unions. We have seen all of that on television before. But a son crossing the line with his own mother, that still horrifies us. That still shocks us into paying attention. That still makes us feel, on a gut level, what it must have felt like to watch this family come apart at the seams. The leaked scene, if it is real, is the show finding a way to make the rot of House Targaryen feel viscerally wrong to a modern viewer. It is not about shock for the sake of shock. It is about giving the audience a moment where we cannot look away from how broken these people have become. And it is about giving Aemond, one of the most popular characters in the show, the kind of psychological complexity that justifies all the violence he is about to commit later in the war. Because here is the bigger picture. Aemond is about to kill people. A lot of people. He is going to be one of the most dangerous figures in the dance. The show needs us to understand why. It needs us to see that the man on Vhagar is not a strategic genius or a noble warrior. He is a deeply damaged person who never learned how to love anyone, including the one person he loved most. And that damage is going to consume the world before it consumes him. That is what this scene, if true, would be doing. Not shocking us for fun. Setting up the psychological foundation for everything Aemond is about to do. So here is where we land. The leak is not confirmed. Maybe the kiss happens. Maybe it does not. Maybe it happens slightly differently than described. We will know on June 21st when Season 3 premieres. But the truth is, it almost does not matter. Because whether or not that specific scene airs, the dynamic it captures is already real. Ewan Mitchell told us in his own words who Aemond is. A man with a skewered idea of affection. A man with a drop of an Oedipus complex. A man whose entire emotional life has been distorted by an attachment to his mother that he never knew how to process. That is the character. That is who has been on our screens the whole time. We just did not have the vocabulary to name it until the actor himself handed us the words. And whether the show makes that subtext explicit with a kiss, or whether it stays in the shadows of every charged glance between mother and son, the story is the same. Aemond Targaryen is a tragedy in motion. A boy who never got enough love. A man who does not know what love is supposed to look like. A warrior whose loyalty to his mother is so warped that it is dangerous to everyone, including her. So if the rumored scene plays out next week the way the leak describes, if Alicent embraces her son for what she thinks is a normal goodbye, and Aemond crosses a line nobody can uncross, remember that this was never going to be a scene about desire. It was going to be a scene about damage, about a son finally letting his mother see, for one terrible second, what she actually raised. And if the scene does not happen exactly that way, the damage is still there. The Oedipus complex is still there. The skewered affection is still there. The show is still telling the same story, just more quietly. Either way, what we are watching in Season 3 of House of the Dragon is the slow unmasking of one of the most psychologically broken characters in the entire franchise. And the actor has been trying to warn us. We just were not listening. Now we are.